good afternoon to you all. Welcome everybody, and thank you very much for participating in this session on international taxation, international tax cooperation. This afternoon, we would like to discuss the details of offshore secrecy and the role of tax havens, as well as possible solutions and challenges ahead. The COVID-19 pandemic, as you all know, has had catastrophic economic and social consequences worldwide, deepening inequalities. It has hit hardest the poorest and most vulnerable populations, leaving them to bear the brunt of the crisis. Meanwhile, the 10 richest men in the world have doubled their wealth to $1.5 trillion since the pandemic began. Now, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has exacerbated this already worrying situation. You all know the rising food prices, the rising energy prices, the lack of resilience of economies in both developed and emerging markets, the return of the arms race, etc., etc. At the same time, attention has been drawn to the enormous wealth that Russian oligarchs hide in tax havens as targeted sanction strategy. It is estimated that at least $1 trillion of their wealth is held in offshore companies. However, this problem is not limited to Russian oligarchs alone. Up to 10% of global GDP is hidden in tax havens. The systemic failure of international financial systems has also enabled tax abuses, corruption, and money laundering to flourish. And much of the hidden wealth cannot be traced to its beneficial owners. To end rising inequality, restore the social contract, and preserve democracy, tax havens and financial secrecy must be tackled now. This will require a combination of political will and concerted global pressure, but it must begin with more transparency. One of the tools that we still have in our reach and which has not yet been implemented is a Global Asset Registry. Would like to talk about this today. That identifies and records all wealth regardless where it is held, and as well its real owners. To discuss these issues today, we have invited Anna-Maja Mertens, Managing Director of Transparency International, Germany, and Ricardo Martner, Commissioner of the Independent Commission for the Reform of International Corporate Tax, ICRICT, who's with us here from Chile. Very happy to have you here. My name is Sarah Ganter. I work at Friedrich Ebert Foundation, responsible for international tax work and other things. And I'm very happy that you joined us for this discussion. And without any further ado, I would now like to give the floor to Anna-Maja with the first question. Anna-Maja, question to you. How widespread is the problem of offshore wealth and tax havens? And also, how does it affect the European Union?
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for the invitation. Really happy to be here and talk about this very important issue. You just, Sarah, mentioned one figure. You said $1 trillion. I heard about $2 trillion and seven when it comes to the former Deputy Managing Director of International Monetary Fund. This was David Lipton, who said that he estimates that it's altogether $7 trillion is hidden in the offshore centers. So it would be 8% of the GDP. But this is just the sort of status quo where it's hidden. And the second thing is, where does it circulate? And there are several. We are also part of the Financial Transparency Coalition with Tax Justice Network, etc., etc. A lot of other NGOs. And they say that it's something like $2 trillion annually cross borders globally. So these are sort of course, figures that we need to talk about. But this is just the amount. It's what we are talking about. What is the real problem? And of course, you can say that not every sort of dollar that is hidden in tax havens is somehow linked to crime or corruption. But there is always a reason to hide money. And that is something we need to talk about. This is an issue also for Transparency International, because our sort of a business case is hidden crime, and we need to have the access. So the first thing what we ask here is to have more transparency. There is still that the main approach that we follow is follow the money. But of course, it needs to be identified and somehow linked to the persons who are responsible for the money, who are the owners of the money. So therefore, we have this one topic what we need to talk about is beneficial ownership, transparency, the registers and the concrete implementation of the registers, because it's not only about the regulations, they need to be well implemented. And that's the challenge, basically. And of course it has, because Sarah, you asked about what has it to do with the European Union. So there are good things and bad things, I would say. The good thing is, and I'm proud of that, to be part of the European Union, because European Union is the global standard setting institution. And that's a good thing. But on the other side, we are a very heterogeneous continent. We have also countries that are dealing with golden visa. As we know, there are Cyprus or Malta, basically selling citizenships. And this is breaks the whole game that we are trying to set here. So we need here global standards more. And of course, we have also in Europe, and Germany is one among the most sort of significant ones, the tax havens, because we help the others to hide the money in Germany, in France, and still also in one parts of the UK.
So thank you very much. So we need more global standards, and we need more transparency in terms of registers. So that is that the political solutions that move us forward, or so then everything would be in place? Or
no, just to start with something. We need to have more cooperation and prosecution. We need to have more collaboration between the law authorities among the countries. We can start with the European Union, but we shouldn't stop there. We need to have more clarity who is responsible for what, because what we are not talking enough, as I said, and also we as Transparency International, as you know, we have our CPI, Corruption Perception Index, and always Germany and my first home country, Finland, rank very high, although we are enabling the countries or the kleptocrats to steal the money from their nations, from their citizens, because we open up the doors and in order to hide their money. So we need to talk about the division of labor in corruption. And there are always 3 steps. First, you steal the money. Second is to hide the money, and then you spend the money. And these are all the steps that we can hinder, and we can make it a bit or not that easy as it is at the moment, so a bit more complicated. And if you increase transparency is just a tool. That's not the main aim, but it's a tool that we are able to talk about that. Then we know what happens, and then we can talk about the sort of good regulation, implementation, convictions and things like this. And of course, there are many other things that you could talk about, but at least, and this is maybe last sentence from my side, because we are in the context of the G7, of course, targeting our issues, this presidency, Germany, and telling that because we have the very complicated federal system, when you see the money laundering regulations, you need to have clarity who is responsible for what and take the political leadership in that.
Thank you very much, Anna-Maja. I'm not sure whether we lost Ricardo now or he just turned off his camera. Yeah, now he's back. Just thank you very much. We have a complementary panel today. Anna-Maja is focusing more on Europe and Germany. And I would, before we go further into the possible solutions, I would now like to turn to you, Ricardo, and ask you about the impact of offshore wealth in developing countries. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah, for the invitation. It's been a long time, but here we are after these very difficult years. It is outraging that in these times the multimillionaires are more multimillionaires than 2 years before. And that's the case in Latin America, especially, but also in other developing countries. So the hidden wealth is a very difficult problem in this moment. It's an economic problem, it's a political problem, and we know, as far as we can know, that 27% or something like that of the hidden wealth is from Latin American multimillionaires. So it's a problem not only for the Russian oligarchs, but also for the developing countries. 10% of the hidden wealth of the whole GDP, and annually something like 50% of the transnational utilities are destinated via profit shifting to tax havens. So it's a contemporary problem, not a past one, and it's very difficult to really understand how to tackle these avenues of flows of billions that are detaxed from the whole world. You know, recently in Chile, after the Pandora Papers, the former president was involved in operations in the British Islands. So it's not only a problem of some people, but also of many presidents or former presidents in our continent. That makes that a very important subject to discuss, and also because many countries are trying to make to introduce wealth taxes because of the pandemic, and the wealth taxes are often very difficult to install, because the authorities don't have all the assets that should be taxed, and that's tax evasion, and we have that on all countries in the region.
Yes, so if you don't know where the money is or where the wealth is, then it's hard to tax. So that's the session is about international tax cooperation, but we are talking a lot about transparency and registers. This is the reason and the link to tax, obviously. Thank you, Ricardo. At the ECRIC Commission, you have proposed the creation of a global asset registry. Can you tell us a little bit more what it is and what it is about?
Yeah, well, many years from now, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, we're discussing about the GAR, you know, the Global Asset Registry, which would be something like an extension of the asset registrations of each country, in a way that tax cooperation could be really a reality, because at the moment we have more tax war than tax cooperation. So it's a long-term goal, but possible in the sense that we can some organization, global organization, could have tax cooperation via this global asset registry. And it would be, of course, a very important tool to all countries to have the capacity to really tax the richest. It's you know, the hidden wealth is not only a Russian problem or Europe sanction problem from the OTAN, the NATO, etc., but also a question of developing countries. So we are very aware of what is happening now, and at the same time, it's not the reinventing the wheel that, as we say, because we have properties registries, and we have also registries, real estate registries. But the problem is the financial dimension, which is estimated to be the 50% of the whole wealth of the whole hidden wealth. So that's the target. I would say that we could begin by evaluating correctly real estates, because the main problem is that we don't have a good evaluation process in many countries, and that would be a good start for us. But we have, of course, many assets all over the world, so it would be a very big issue to install the idea, at least the global asset registry.
Anna, if you permit, I would just stay with this for one more second. Ricardo, that if the money that ends up in tax havens goes there mainly due to criminal activity, what would the global asset registry change then? So if this is, of course, registries needs people who want to declare their wealth. So if it's criminal, then it's useless, or what would you say?
That's a very good question. But what we have in this moment, it's very good progress in the exchange of information, globally and between tax administrations. So that would be a mechanism to detect at least what's happening with the illicit financial flows, for instance. But that's a long way to go.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you very much. Coming back to you, Anna Maya, I would now like to address the political dimension and the challenges ahead. We are here at the G7 summit, the Thinkers Summit of the going along with the G7 process. What do you think should be the role of G7 and G20 countries in addressing offshore wealth and tax havens? And more specific, what should Germany's role be under the presidency of G7?
Well, what we saw at the beginning of the G7 presidency was the program that didn't mention corruption at all. And we were really, really disappointed. And also the money laundering and all these issues of financial asset recovery were not there. But as the invasion of Russia in the Ukraine took place, all changed, also the program and the agenda of the German G7 presidency. And what we see is that all of a sudden our topics are there on the agenda. So our expectations are that they are moving fast, they are taking the responsibility, being real leaders as the global leaders. And there are several things that they could and should do. So first of all, and I think it's a good thing, what we have now this new transatlantic task force. We need to have a level above the national borders. We need to have a law enforcement body that is not stick to these national regulations, but is above that. And it needs to be based and work upon a exchange of information, but also what we need to have a more, like I said in the beginning, global standards. And what we need particularly is the global standards and beneficial ownership transparency. And this is the second topic that we ask also the G7 presidency. And of course, it's very easy to say we need more transparency, but the main thing is we need to ask what kind of transparency, what for and where. And we see that, and you just, Ricardo, mentioned the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers, and this was the starting point for the European Union to start with the anti-money laundering directives. And since then, we have now the 5th and the 6th is coming, that you need to turn into national legislation, you need to implement that nationally. And what we see is that the German government, for example, takes the lowest level that possible and still to comply with the directions. Because, for example, the directive of the European Union says that you need to declare your ownership if you have the maximum is 25% of ownership. So, but of course you could regulate it nationally and say starting from 0 or 10 or 15%. But the German government said 25% is enough. And then we have situation that there are 4 owners of one entity, organization or company. And because the German legislation, this implementation of the EU regulation says that you need to declare your ownership if you own more than 25%. And if you have 4, then each of them owns 25. It's not more than 25%. So you don't have to declare anything. So you don't have the ownership. And the second thing is, there is no monitoring, and Ricardo, you mentioned also evaluation monitoring. This is very important topics. There is no evaluation monitoring body that checks this register. So this is why we need the journalists, the civil society checking these registers and also getting access to the information. It's normal to have the information who owns the company that I'm dealing with. But it costs money in Germany. So it takes like €5, €10. But if you're an investigative journalist, you need to have sort of thousands of studies and research to have the access to check the information. Because in the very beginning of your work, you never know what you're looking for. But you know that if you have the access. But there is no director of the newspaper who says, well, here's €10,000, go ahead and write an article. So there are several sort of vehicles that is important. And also coming back to these gold visas, it's also because the criminals are very creative persons, and we are always lagging behind and trying to get, and always when we have new regulation, they find the loopholes in these regulations. And one is, there are sanctions if you are putting wrong information there, or if the information is missing. And of course, it depends then whether we find that it's missing or it's wrong information. But if you just spell your name wrongly, it could be just a sort of mistake, and there is no sanctions to that. So then you have sort of persons that own different countries, European-wide, but their names are always differently spelled. And if it's a Russian name, you cannot just see that. So you cannot cross-search the registries because the name is always differently written. Or you have different nationalities because they have now the Cyprian or Maltese citizenship. So they know how to be hidden, although we are trying to get this information. So these are all the things that we need to change. We need to have the access to what we are trying to say to the presidency is, you need us. And it's your topic. It's not our topic. We are talking about global solutions. And this is why you need the civil society, you need the journalists, because we are playing our part here. It's a game that we all need to be very active and able to do our job.
Thank you, Anna-Maria. Yeah, we already in the warm-up of this session, we already said that it's kind of sad that the actual situation opens up a window for opportunity for work on transparency measures. You mentioned a lot of the technical problems and questions that need to be addressed. What do you think are the maybe political challenges that need to be overcome? Is it a good moment now to push for reforms, for political reforms, or is it more a change of focus?
Yeah, well, the challenge remains, it's a global diplomacy. It has to be sort of attractive to the leaders, because otherwise they won't implement anything. And we see that also in a national level. If we talk about the enablers, we are not just as a state enabler of global corruption, but they are also in the sort of level below that. In Germany, there are enablers. These are the auditors or the who are responsible when it comes to the business in real estate sector, where money is very much hidden. Also in Germany, by the way, in the new coalition, they took into their coalition agreement that they said, well, we are going to change it and make it more harder. So it shouldn't be in future not anymore allowed to pay your real estate cash, but it was. So you see where we are. It's not a huge thing, but yes, these are the main challenges, and there are two. You can win more by being a tax haven. So, and this is what we need to change. There are conflicts of interest. The interest is our interest to have a global standards, and then there are other interests that you have this short-term outcome for your win. But of course, then you are risking the whole game. So you lose the game, but you have a very short-term win. and that's the main challenge I think globally seen also.
Thank you, Anna Maya. Ricardo, turning to you again. Anna Maya mentioned the Transatlantic Task Force. As ICRIC Commission, you have recently written an open letter to G20 leaders to ask them to convene an international summit to tackle tax havens and to work towards the creation of a global asset registry. Do you think can countries in the global south take the lead on this? Perhaps together with some G7 countries? And can you see that there's a chance for cooperation as a way forward?
Well, you know, some of my colleagues of the ICRIC were part of the FACTI panel in the UN, you know, and that I think that was a very good starting point to the international tax cooperation. With the view of anti-money laundering, transparency and low tax jurisdiction come together, you know. So it's very important to view the two parts: the transparency part and the tax evasion part. They are linked, even if not ever there has been some the same kind of problems, but. I think the FACTI was a very good point to make the recommendation to the countries, and at the same time, within the OECD work, there were the Punta del Este declaration. You know, the Punta del Este declaration from many countries of La Declaración de Punta del Este, with many countries of Latin America, which are now engaged in the anti-money laundering. So there has been some progress, at least at the official level, and of course the letter to the G20 of ICRIC is part of what we're talking about, the importance of civil organizations to push to do something or to do the best to incite the countries to begin to really have a task force. Recently there was a paper from the World Inequality Lab and the tax unit of analysis of tax evasion, where they were talking about the task force within the European Union, you know, and that's a big I would say how to define a task force within the European Union. That would be something like, I don't know, NCIS or that kind of TV series, you know, where there's a lot of investigators trying to make their best effort to really identify where are the lacks of the problem. But how to do that in a global perspective, it's quite harder. So that's a way that we need a task force within the UN, the tax body.
Okay, yeah, Ricardo is mentioning the UN panel on financial integrity and financial accountability and transparency and integrity, right? The so-called FACTI panel that was took place at the United Nations actually in the first year of the pandemic from Germany. Heidemarie Wiczorek-Zeul was part of this panel, and they actually developed a whole series of recommendations that spell out a lot of or answer a lot of the questions that we have now again on the table, and we can hope that the actual situation draws more attention to these kind of recommendations that have been developed in the past, and that organizations like Transparency International and also the ICRIC Commission have been developing throughout the last decades or years. Did you want to say something? Otherwise, I would like to open the floor, but if you have another comment on what Ricardo said, go ahead.
Maybe one example, and I shouldn't forget to say that we have released today a new study in terms of the are the G7 countries able to implement the sanctions? And if not, why not? And of course, these are the topics that we are talking here. And we say this is not possible because they don't know who owes what. And we see that very concrete and precise in Germany because we just don't find the assets. That's the problem. And also maybe one further example in terms of transparency and how tricky it is to implement it in a good way is that you all know the Nord Stream 2 and the foundation in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern that was sort of connected to that. And Transparency International Germany, we asked them who is the real owner because they need to be registered in the BO register as well. And then they gave us the information and they named the board members. And we said, well, this is not exactly what we asked. We asked who are the owners of this, so who takes the decisions and who give the money. And in the end, we were writing both to the government of the country Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, but also all the authorities that are responsible for this transparency register. And every and each of them said, well, I'm not responsible for that. So it was impossible to find a body or a person who is responsible for sort of putting the right figures there or who is interested that the figures are not there. And in the end, of course, it's Gazprom, but it was not mentioned there. So what to do with that? It's like an Asterix and Obelix, everyone takes a step back and all of a sudden there is no one who takes the responsibility. And I think this is the problem in the federal system because we have always these two levels that are playing to each other.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is also, Anna Maya, Ricardo, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is also the idea of a global asset registry, that it's not about the transparent citizen, but it's about linking registers that are, many of them are already there, making them usable and making them functional. I would now like to open for the audience. I already saw some tax experts in the room here. So, as Ricardo is joining us from Chile and can't see the audience, I have a hot chair here and a microphone. So we would invite you to come here and join us on the panel with your questions, comments. Questions can also be about registers, but can also be broader questions on international tax cooperation and transparency. So who wants first? Hayo. I think you have to move the camera a little bit. There's a hi.
Thank you. It's a very general and maybe easy question, because what is really, I'm wondering why this whole subject of drying out tax havens and hidden capitals and stuff like that is not creating the momentum that one would expect it would create. I'm talking about the two levels of population as well as governments. Now, it's a hypothesis. None of us is hiding a couple of millions here and there. You know, a few elitist organizations and think tanks are working on it, and not all 198 countries do not see the potential of actually creating money and doing something right that they could reinvest into their economies, their infrastructure, their social protection system or whatever. But I'm mainly talking about the population. Why are we not out on the streets in masses in order to, you know, dry out these havens and do something? Because not every country is Malta and Guernsey and Liechtenstein and I don't know. Why is there so little momentum?
Thank you, Hayo. That was my colleague Hayo Lanz from the FS Geneva office. Anybody else who wants to? Yeah, Christian von Haldenwang. Can you see us, Ricardo? Can you see everybody?
Perfect.
Yeah, good.
Hola, Ricardo, gusto verte nuevamente después de tantos años.
Hola, sí, ¿cómo estás?
Sorry, I will switch to English though. Yes, I think this is a really very important discussion, and I'm really grateful that Friedrich Ebert Foundation and ICRIC and Transparency International and others are taking this up and pushing this forward. At the same time, there is one area where we already see change in international taxation, and that is the exchange of information. It's a rather new movement. It started in 2017, 2018, basically. The first country started to exchange information. I don't think that Russia was very prominent there, so this might be part of the problem, but it would be interesting to see, and I don't know if you know about studies that look from an academic scientific perspective, that look on the impact that this change in the relationship between tax authorities has already. I think there are a few studies that show that already some changes taking place, and it would be important to see how this then could be related to the Global Asset Registry actually, and how this could, you know, be used also in order to give more information. And additional question here, of course, is who would get access to that information? When we talk about exchange of information, it's the tax authorities that have access, and it's confidentiality that is very high. It has a very high relevance actually. So for many low and middle income countries, getting into this exchange of information is an issue of tax capacity and tax administration capacity also, and the ability to guarantee this level of confidentiality. So one question, should we waive confidentiality as a principle when it comes to information on beneficial ownership? And another question is, very quick. This is not only about tax evasion. Tax evasion, of course, is a huge issue here. But we know that at an international level, or actually basically in most countries, that tax income, the taxation of income from capital is lower than the taxation of income from labor. And there's no other reason to that than the capacity or the mobility of capital actually, and the capacity of capital to evade taxation. So if we would have a situation, this is what tax inspectors dream, right? If we would have a situation where we would have complete knowledge on the beneficial ownership of assets, then this would mean that we could tax income from capital at the same rate than income from labor. And this, of course, would be a beautiful situation where many of our fiscal needs would be solved.
Thank you very much. Very important questions from Christian von Haldenwang from the German Development Institute. I would like to give it back to you two. The question, why are we not in the street on the streets in masses? And then a question on the progress in the area of exchange of information. Should we waive confidentiality, and also this comment on the balance of taxation of capital and taxation of labor. Who wants to go first? Ricardo.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to say two important things. I think for the debate, first of all, the momentum in many countries is here. There has been many mobilizations in the streets and well, in almost everywhere in Latin America. So there has been a momentum that involves, of course, the end of the abuse, the tax abuse. In general, not only the question of tax havens. That's funny because in Spanish and French we say paradis fiscal or fiscal paradise rather than haven. So maybe it's an initial confusion of terms. I don't know, but I prefer to speak about tax havens or guarida fiscal in Spanish. So there's not only that problem. Christian, I think Christian put it very good. There's a question of taxation much more to population via VAT, more than all, and very little about social. Personal income taxes, you know, so there's an imbalance that is very included in the political debate, but also in the citizen. Everybody knows that. And the question there, so is that we are renewing in some countries that have more leftist governments, the question of the fiscal pact of CEPAL in the 90s. Christian, you must remember that, and where every government is now trying to introduce tax wealth, for instance, and also diminishing the tax evasion, or trying to do it. And I think that what Christian was saying is very important, to have to strengthen the tax administration, to begin with a real exchange of information within the countries. But you know, something that I think it's very important, that is we see the tax secrecy or the financial secrecy that Tax Justice Network published. They are all industrial countries, or at least most of the G20. So what to do with that?
Yeah, Ricardo mentioned the financial secrecy index that was just published, I think, last week, and Germany sadly moved on to rank, I think, 7. Yeah, so which is not a good thing. So you should not move up; you should move down. So yeah, Anna Maya, exchange of information, and should we waive confidentiality? Left over for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe just one sentence to the first question: why are we not sort of advocating on the streets for the change? And I think it depends on, as Ricardo said, where you look at, and I think in Latin America and some African states, you see the people on the streets, but you don't see that actually here in Europe, although we would have a reason for that as well. Because if we see our school system or streets, and we need the tax income to these topics. And I'm a political scientist myself, and it could be, and I think this is really frustrating, that the people give up. The people that I talk to, normal people in the streets and citizens, they say, well, there's nothing we can do about that. And that's a real problem for democracy. And the other side, and if they say, well, they're higher there and higher level, they are not interested to change that, and we don't have the power to change that. And I think it's very dangerous for our sort of a society agreement, Gesellschaftsvertrag, how we organize ourselves and our democracy here. So, but it's an interesting question, and I think for the second, I think this is really, it could be the game changer. This exchange of information, and it has something to do also with the naming and shaming approach that we are using as the last tool. If nothing goes forward, then we need to publish that and show and scandalize and sort of to generate some movement and say this is something that is we cannot tolerate. And I think it happened, and we saw that as well. And it's possible, and we should talk about the different approaches and where does it lead to. And in my home country in Finland, I know it's not a system that we can just transfer, but there is no tax privacy. So the whole tax system is publicly available. And I think the good thing is I can, of course, then very easy, I can ring there in the office or just to have access through internet to know what my neighbor earns. But that's not so important. But I think the important part is where does the state spend this money to? So they are sort of showing where the money goes to, and there are some empirical researches that show that the moral of paying taxes gets higher if you publish what you are using it for. And I think this is just interesting to see the different models and also to exchange the information. And if I may, when we talk about this, what could help also when we talk about the personal involvement and who is guilty in terms of who is connected to what crime, what we need also in these beneficial ownership transparency registers. And when we talk about the exchange of information between the countries, we do need a register that doesn't only say who is owner of the company, but also what does this person owns. So this is important that we cannot judge by companies, but also by names, because we have also a cooperation among the NGOs globally. So I just got the information of our Georgian chapter. They sent me the list of names and said, well, we have information that these persons are trying to hide their assets and they are arriving Germany as well. Can you just check if they are involved in the organizations that are doing business in Germany? And it would be very good to have both sides searchable registers. And this would really be a game changer as well, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna-Maja. I think this is also to your question, Christian, that there has been a lot of progress on exchange of information, but it's mainly focusing on bank accounts and not on other types of wealth. We are running out of time. These sessions are very short at the Think7. I like the format, but it's I think we could go on. Very interesting insights from both of you. Ricardo, very much for joining us from Chile. Thank you very much, everybody, for staying with us despite the technical and complex topic. I hope we all meet again at the G20 summit on Global Asset Registry and sanctions that will be convened after the open letter from ICRICT. Yeah.
Also,
can it in my program it says until 50? Or, and then there is a 20-minute coffee break. Okay, so we can if okay, we can go 5 more minutes. That's good. Then I already gave my final remarks, but then you can have the word for final remarks too. So sorry. So
Ricardo, it's up to us.
Yeah. So
okay.
Feel free to. No, Ricardo. Final remarks from your side. Something you want to?
Yeah. Just a couple of things. First of all, I only spoke about Latin American countries. The question was for developing countries, so I'm sorry for that. Just to say that I was always very in favor to the campaign or the tax coordination of African countries around the question of illicit financial flows. And the declaration of Addis Abeba shows that. So there's also in many countries, efforts of tax coordination that are very important, much more than in Latin America. In Latin America, we don't have any efforts nor a body to really have a tax coordination. And related to that, I remember most of the meetings that we have had, the question of exchange of information, which is very difficult between neighbor countries. You know, I remember the data of Argentina had nothing to do with the Uruguayan data in the question of commerce, of exchange of goods. That's simple. So really, the exchange of information is a political problem also, and not only automatic.
Thank you, Ricardo. Anna-Maja.
Thank you. Thank you for this further opportunity. That's great. Maybe what I would like to stress is the opportunity that we have at the moment. And I think that's true. And we had also, because I was in the context of C7, co-chair of the working group Open Societies. And we had this exchange with the German Sherpa, Dr. Jörg Kukis. And he said in a public event that if we would have listened to you earlier, we wouldn't have the problem now. And this is the sentence that I use, because we need to use these sentences. We need to be more strategically working and also to make joint sort of activities among the civil society, but also think tanks, and see what can we get together. Because also TI, although we have big brand, we are tiny organizations among these huge other businesses and companies and whatever. So my sort of ask would be for us all to say that let's use this opportunity, and also to use the monitoring, because if there is no authority or monitoring body, we can do that. We are also doing the shadow reporting to SDGs. We are doing different things, and also the UNCAC evaluation. And you can use, and we can use our brand and we can use some people that we have in research, and just to have a division of labor, what is our responsibility here. And we are really willing to take our responsibility and also to lead our part.
Yeah, I think this is a really good closing sentence that we had. Thank you very much, Anna Maya. Thank you very much, Ricardo, again. Thank you very much for being here. And yeah, now I think we can have a break before the last parallel session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.